Nightlifers, it is Pastor Stephen coming to you with another edition of Vevotions. Normally these video devotions are kind of reserved privately for those who are ministers at Nightlife, who are volunteers at Nightlife, and I just use them as a means to encourage the volunteers. But I want to make this available. If you're a volunteer and you're watching this one I'm going to make public, and so feel free to share this with anybody that you'd like to. And the reason I'm making this one public when I don't normally the rest of them is just because it pertains to the series of messages that we've been talking about in the book of Acts. And because we're not covering every book or every verse in that book, we would have kind of missed this point. But I wanted a chance to share this with you because back in January, I had the opportunity to go to Israel. And we went to a coast town called Caesarea. And it plays prominently in one part of the book of Acts. It was the city in which Paul was imprisoned for over 2 years. We read this in Acts chapter 24, verse 27. It says, "When 2 years had elapsed, Felix was succeeded by Porcius Festus, and desiring to do the Jews a favor, Felix left Paul in prison." Now, you're probably thinking, yeah, so what? But there is a point to what I'm saying, and the point is this. If you go back just a couple of chapters, when Paul is first coming to Israel, to Jerusalem, prior to his capture and his imprisonment, we read this in Acts chapter 21, verse 17. It says, "When we had come to Jerusalem, the brothers received us gladly." Now you might be thinking that's not a lot of help, but I want you to pay attention to the pronoun here. It says, "When we had come to Jerusalem." This is part of what is known as a "we" section in the in the book of Acts. And "we" is the first person plural pronoun, and it indicates that the speaker or author is including himself or herself in what's being said. In other words, the author of Acts is saying that he was with Paul when he came to Jerusalem. That is, Luke was with Paul when Paul came to Jerusalem. Now we know that 2 years later, after Paul had been in prison for 2 years and then just a little bit longer, when he was getting ready to leave, when he was being sent to Rome to stand trial before the emperor, this Luke, was still with Paul. We read this in Acts chapter 27, verse 1. It says, "And when it was decided that we should sail for Italy, they delivered Paul and some other prisoners to a centurion of the Augustan cohort named Julius." We'll talk about that journey from Israel to Rome this next weekend at Nightlife. But I want to point something out to you. Paul is in prison in Israel for 2 years. He has an opportunity to speak to some kings and some governors, but he probably had a lot of time on his hands during those 2 years when he wasn't occupied, but was still imprisoned. He was in prison in Israel. Now, Paul was the apostle to the Gentiles, and he may have been thinking to himself during those 2 years, "God, what are you up to? Why have you left me here in Israel for these 2 years? I thought that you had a purpose and a plan for me. I know that you sent me here and warned me that I would be imprisoned, but why am I here for 2 years?" Now, I don't want to speculate too much. I don't know if that's what Paul is thinking, but it's very, very possible. What I do know is this, that for 2 years, Paul is in prison, and apparently during those 2 years, Luke is in Israel with Paul. This is significant because at the beginning of the Gospel of Luke, in Luke chapter 1, the first 3 verses, we read this. "Inasmuch as many have undertaken to compile a narrative of the things that have been accomplished among us, just as those who from the beginning were eyewitnesses and ministers of the word have delivered them to us, it seemed good to me also, having followed all things closely for some time past, to write an orderly account for you, most excellent Theophilus, that you may have certainty concerning the things you have been taught." How do you write an orderly account? How do you write a factual account if you've never been to the place where the events happened, if you've never interviewed the eyewitnesses, if you've never seen the places where Jesus did the miracles, or talked to the people that heard his teachings, or talked to the people that he healed? How do you write an orderly account? You see, for 2 years while Paul was in prison, Luke was in the land of Israel, being able to interview and study and see the things that Jesus did, hear the things that he taught from the eyewitnesses, from the people who heard them firsthand. Luke was in a time of preparation during those 2 years to write the Gospel of Luke, which has now affected generations of believers, in which we are finally about to wrap up this this series through Luke and Acts. That's pretty incredible. Sometimes in our lives we may feel like we're stuck. Maybe we feel like we've been left in a place and we're wondering, God, what are you up to here? Why am I going through this difficulty? Why does it feel like I'm stuck? Why have you left me in this place where I know you have something further for me to do, like God had for Paul, but he was kind of stuck in a place for a pretty long period of time. Why have you left me here? I just want to encourage you with this thought, that God knows what he's doing, and that while you may not see clearly what he's up to right now in your life, God has a purpose and a plan, and it may not always be about you. It may not be that he's going to work some great thing in your life during this time, but what if there's somebody else that he's going to use and bless, that this is a time for them, that because of the situations in your life, somebody else is being prepared, somebody else is being readied, somebody else is being equipped, so that God's kingdom can continue to go forward. What if God is using you in that way? Will you be patient with him? Will you allow him to continue to use you in that way? Will you be faithful in the place where God has you and wait on him to move you on, not rushing things, not getting antsy, not getting out of control, but allowing God to do his work so that he can prepare and ready other people for the task that he has for them to do. I hope that you will. I hope that it encourages you today and that you have a great week. I'll see you this coming Sunday at Nightlife and next time on Vevotions. Until then, have a great week and grace and peace.